Daniel Sports Center, we go for a college football game preview and prediction on the Week 11 matchup between the Nebraska Cornhuskers and the Michigan Wolverines. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 11. You got Nebraska, who is 3-6 on the season. This team has had just a brutal season to this point. They face one of their biggest challenges of the season as they take on Michigan on the road. The Wolverines being a team who is 9-0 right now, and this is just as important as any other game for Michigan as this team looks to remain a major college football playoff contender. We'll be over a full game preview and prediction on this match here today, starting with their team trends. Nebraska lost to Minnesota 13-20 in their Week 10 matchup. And if you look into that game a little bit more, Nebraska controlled the first half. They're up 10-0 at halftime, shut out the Gophers in the first half. But in the second half, this team just fell flat. They couldn't do anything on offense. Couldn't get a first down. Like, there was a period between the early parts of the second quarter and the middle of the fourth quarter where Nebraska didn't even get a first down. So when it comes down to it, Nebraska's offense just fell apart down the stretch there. And defensively, they just couldn't stop Minnesota as well in the second half. So Nebraska at 3-6. This team's chances of making a bowl game are just about gone at this point. I mean, you got to beat Michigan here. You got to beat Wisconsin the next week, beat Iowa after that on the road. I mean, the chances that Nebraska makes a bowl game are pretty much gone. So at this point for the Cornhuskers, I mean, it's just been a brutal season, a very disappointing season yet again. I mean, Nebraska's just been a huge disappointment the past few years, but I mean, this is another just brutal, disappointing season. I mean, you've had an interim head coach the entire season, Casey Thompson. Starting quarterback is now injured. I mean, it's just one thing after another for Nebraska, and they obviously have an uphill battle going up against Michigan, who just beat Rutgers 52-17, a solid win for Michigan, even though Rutgers led that game at halftime, believe it or not. And Michigan is 9-0 heading into this matchup, still undefeated and very much a college football playoff contender. Games be on Saturday, November 12th in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So the Wolverines are the home team for this matchup. Kickoff is 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Spread's going with Michigan by 29. So the Wolverines are favored by over 4 touchdowns in this matchup. Which maybe not a big surprise considering Michigan is clear and away the better team in this matchup. I mean, yeah, Wolverines, I mean, this is a team that is solid on both sides of the ball. Defensively, they're only allowing 12 points a game. Offensively, they get right around 42 points a game. So this is a solid team on both sides of the ball. Over-under is 51. FPI is going Michigan 97.1%. Series history, Michigan leads at 6-4. They've won the past 2 matchups, and Michigan has also won 3 out of the past 5. And this is one of those matchups in the Big Ten that we haven't seen too much. These teams have really only played, 5 times since Nebraska joined the Big Ten. And obviously you got, both teams, for a little while to start, they were in the same division. But since the Big Ten split into East-West, we really haven't seen this matchup. I mean, this is only the 3rd matchup in this series since 2013. So that is something to keep in mind here as we head into this matchup. Your stat comparison, Nebraska is 83rd in points per game. They're 95th in points allowed, 51st in pass yards a game, 84th in rush yards, and then for yards allowed, 109th in passing, 102nd in rushing. So this is a team that, I mean, they've shown potential on offense at points this season, but they've just been extremely inconsistent. Especially, I mean, this is a team with, when Casey Thompson isn't playing, this team has had a lot of trouble scoring points. I mean, if you look back to that Illinois game, they only scored 9 points, and Casey Thompson was out for the majority of that game. Couldn't even get a first down, barely, after Casey Thompson left with his injury. I mean, they looked pretty good at the start of the game against Minnesota, but, I mean, they only scored 13 in the end, and Minnesota beat them. And defensively, I mean, this team maybe hasn't been terrible defensively the past couple of games, but I mean, this defense definitely is, going up against a Michigan team that is rushing for 250 yards a game. I mean, Nebraska's got their work ahead of them, that's for sure. But as for Michigan, they're 3rd in points per game, 2nd in points allowed, 88th in pass yards a game, 3rd in rush yards. And for yards allowed, they're 7th in passing, 1st in rushing. So this is the best rush defense in the country. So you got Nebraska, who's probably the best player on offense right now is Anthony Grant. I mean, you also got Trey Palmer, who's been outstanding to say the least. But Anthony Grant especially has really impressed me this season. He's rushed for nearly 900 yards, 6 touchdowns. Trey Palmer is obviously a key player on this offense. And Casey Thompson has shown potential as well, but he just turns over the ball way too much. I mean, he's thrown for 2,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 10 picks on his 12 touchdowns. So he's thrown a lot of interceptions and turned over the ball a lot this season. and we'll see whether or not he's playing in this matchup, as he still is injured at this point. So we'll see how the week progresses and how that happens. But for Michigan, this team is, you got Blake Corum, who is one of the best running backs in the country. He's rushed for nearly 1,200 yards, 16 touchdowns on the season to this point. You got J.J. McCarthy, who is the lead passer. Caden McNamara was a quarterback for a little while, but J.J. McCarthy has taken over full-time as the starter. 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, 2 picks. J.J. McCarthy has got a pretty high ceiling as a quarterback. I really like him, and obviously this defense has been great this year, allowing only 12 points a game. So this is for Nebraska, it's going to be tough to score points on this Michigan defense. You're probably not going to be able to score, at the max. I think Nebraska is able to score 20 points in this matchup. So for the Cornhuskers, their defense especially is going to need to play ball and really, they're going to have to be really strong on the defensive side of the ball, stopping Blake Corum and potentially keeping this game close, force turnovers. That's the only way that Nebraska is going to win this game, or at least even keep it close for that matter. Recent matchups, Nebraska, once again, lost to Minnesota 13-20, lost to Illinois 9-26, lost to Purdue in a shootout on the road, 37-43. They have won a couple of conference games. They beat Rutgers on the road 14-13 and also beat Indiana 35-21. As for Michigan, they've won every game this season, beat Rutgers last week 52-17, beat Michigan State 29-7, beat Penn State 41-17. This team's been really good at home the past few games. They beat Indiana 31-10 and also beat Iowa 27-14. And there's an argument right now. Looking at their past 4 games in particular, maybe the past 3, because that Indiana game was a little bit sloppy for a while. But the past 3 games for Michigan, this team is, there's an argument that they could very well go on to win the Big Ten and beat out Ohio State. I think that's very much a possibility at this current point. I feel like everyone is looking at Ohio State as they're going to win the Big Ten, no problem. But Michigan, this team is not far behind. In fact, I can make an argument right now that Michigan is better than Ohio State at this current point in the season. Obviously, we'll see those two teams play each other in a few weeks, and that's going to be an insane matchup once again this season. And it is in Columbus, so Michigan's going to have to play on the road. But for this matchup, Nebraska, obviously, if they want any chance of keeping this game close, they're going to have to force turnovers. This defense is going to have to play their best game, like the game of their lives at this point. Because this offense, especially if Casey is out, which it looks like Casey's going to be back, at least Nebraska can hope so. But either way, this offense is going to be tough for them to score more than 20, 25 points. So this defense is going to have to play really well and force some big turnovers and maybe some points defensively as well. That would be huge. But for Michigan, this team has got, once again, significant chance to return the college football playoff at this point. They're a complete team on both sides of the ball. Defensively, this team is nothing short of outstanding, and offensively, Blake Corum, McCarthy, this offense is great as well, that's for sure. And honestly, for Michigan, just saying it straight up, they shouldn't have a problem scoring points on this Nebraska defense. They're allowing an average of 30 points a game. They're allowing nearly 200 rush yards a game. Blake Corum should have no problem being able to rush on this defense. So that being said, let's get to the prediction here for Nebraska and Michigan. Coming up here in Week 11, and this is no surprise, I'm going with Michigan in this matchup. It's just a matter of how close, and in the end, I'm going to take the Wolverines by about 4 touchdowns in this matchup. I think Nebraska is able to score 17, so they score some points at least, but maybe Nebraska starts fast, kind of like they did against Minnesota. We've seen that at some points this season. Nebraska starts pretty quickly. And I feel like Nebraska, maybe they get a touchdown or two at the start of this game in the first quarter. But from there, I just don't know if Nebraska can maintain that. And Michigan gets the win here 45-17. Honestly, I could see it being even more of a blowout, but I'm going to be a little bit optimistic and actually take Nebraska to cover the spread in this matchup, which is currently 29 points towards the Wolverines. But I'll say Michigan 80%. I would be absolutely stunned if Nebraska won this game. That'd probably be the upset of the year. Quite honestly, I think Nebraska has honestly got very little chance of winning this, just the way that the Cornhuskers look right now. But Michigan, over-under is 51. I'll take the over for this one, and Nebraska to cover the spread in the end. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.